Welcome everyone! On this channel we talk about the beautiful and complicated life of nomads. So let's begin! Hello there, for those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Elena, I'm the host here. I was born in Serbia and lived in France for 16 years and now I live in the UK. I've been here for just over 7 years. I have worked as a flight attendant for 10 years and I speak 4 languages. Most of the people that I know have lived abroad at some point in their lives, so that is something that I love talking about. And today we'll be sharing the stories of Marianne and Mina, who are 2 extraordinary people and amazing cooks.
So I'm Marianne and I am Dutch. I'm a foodie, as you can tell from the name of my business, the Dutch Foodie. I'm Dutch, but I've grown up in Belgium actually, and I've been in the UK now for 33 years. And I am a private chef and a virtual cooking coach. Do a lot of stuff online with cooking courses and programs and things to basically inspire people to not just cook more, but to enjoy cooking more.
Great. And Mina, hi.
Hello, I'm Mina. I run a little bakery in the heart of the Surrey countryside called the Village Cakery, Surrey. I live in a village, hence the Village Cakery. I started baking for joy, really. And now I bake for other people with focus on flavor, really, rather than decoration. And that's my passion, that's my business, that's my everything, that's my story.
You tell your story and your passion with your food, and that, as you say, it's very, very based around flavors, and they're just so yummy. Mina, you're from Bulgaria, right?
I'm from Bulgaria. I've lived in Britain for 20-something years. So I've got the benefits, like Marianne, to be very familiar with the British cuisine and baking and taste, but also I draw inspiration from my roots and from European baking as well.
Oh, I'm a novice here, you guys, compared to you. Like 30 years, 23 years. I've been here for only 7-8 years, so I still have a lot of time, a lot of things to discover. I'm going to bring you back to when you first arrived here. And can you tell me what your first experience of British food was?
Oh gosh,
remember?
Well, in my case, it was. I mean, I've grown up in Belgium, just on the Dutch-Belgian border, and I don't know if you know, but the Belgians they're real gourmands. They love their food, and it's not that well known, but I was privileged to study in Brussels, for instance, and I had a boyfriend with an expense account, you know, so I was used to good food. When I moved to the UK for love, he's long gone, I'm still here. Oh. He was actually studying up north in Newcastle upon Tyne. Now, 33 years ago in Newcastle upon Tyne, I wouldn't say that gourmet food had quite arrived yet. I've seen it change over the years, but certainly at the time it was a little bit of a I wouldn't say a shock to the system, but let's face it, I moved countries for the first British person I met. So I wasn't familiar with British food, I didn't know what people ate. I realized in hindsight when I served him baked beans. Well, he asked about baked beans. We know them as beans and tomato sauce. Here, baked beans, it's a whole different culture, right? I didn't know this. When I serve beans and tomato sauce, I just buy a cheap whatever. It didn't have to be a certain brand. You learn things, right?
Yeah.
Chuck it in the pan, and then I start to add things. I add flavor. That's what we do, right? Us people that are in food that don't know about baked beans. I started adding food, and I remember my boyfriend at the time just looking at what I was doing in sheer horror and amazement. What was I doing to his baked beans? And
open the can.
I remember. And toast. There's another whole history there. So I won't even go on stotty. So you have like a specific bread in Newcastle called a stotty. It's really big. Okay. And then when you put filling in it, I don't know how. I had a lot to learn. Put it that way. How about you, Mina?
So, Marianne, I have pretty much identical story with beans, baked beans, and my husband.
Love
my
it.
husband is English and very English as well. He was like, no, you don't put mint, you don't put all that stuff, you know, some herbs. Oh my God, I ruined the sacred beans. I don't touch it since, you know. But at the beginning, I could not understand British food. And I have to start with horseradish sauce. Oh my Lord, that was the most horrific thing I've ever put in my mouth, as well as Marmite. And the first Marmite toast I made, I laid it thick as marmalade, as jam. And I tried to eat it.
Wow.
Classic. Now I know, and I must tell you, I cannot have beef without horseradish sauce. I love it. I enjoy my Marmite, and also it's a secret ingredient in my caramel sauce as well. I add a little bit of Marmite, so that's you can make a really palatable salted caramel sauce that has slightly bit of umami. You add Marmite at the end.
I love that.
I love it. I
pick up on the Marmite because Marmite, not everyone loves it. But I use it in cooking as well. I don't eat it. I never learned to like it to eat it. But like you, Mina, I added to add umami. I love the caramel idea.
I love it. Yeah, I have to try that. I use it for sausage rolls. That's the only time when I make homemade sausage rolls, I use Marmite there in my recipe. But that will be the only time. And we have a jar that kind of stays there for a year because I don't make sausage rolls very often. But no, yeah. Oh, the baked beans story is very, very funny. I've always been lazy, but actually, I've always been like the British way, just get a can and just microwave it or whatever. But recently, weirdly enough, I've been wanting to make baked beans in my traditional sort of serving way, as you say, adding spices. We add paprika and then sort of vegetable spices or vegetable stock. And I've asked my cousin actually for the recipe for my grand's recipe, traditional recipe. So he's supposed to send it to me. So I'll be making. What sort of spices do you put when that first time when you made baked beans? You were saying, Marianne, what sort of spices did you put?
Oh, I'll tang to certain things. So it's one of those things where you learn some of these British flavors, like you say, Mina, and you may or may not like them as they are, but you learn their qualities, and then you can add them to something to do something different, like your caramel sauce or you know, the tang of Worcester to baked beans or something like that, right, Mina?
Absolutely. So the story of Worcester sauce is really interesting. It was actually discovered by mistake. It was ordered by a merchant and it was left to brew for over 2 years with the spice makers. And they opened it, they tested it, and they said, oh no, that's not good. And they left it to mature for a bit longer. And that's how they came up with it. It's a byproduct. And cheese on toast with Worcester sauce. Oh my Lord.
That is nice. I will say that is nice. I will actually say, I haven't had that for years. You just reminded me of actually a British food memory that I did used to have when, you know, when my boyfriend was a student and money was tight.
That's student food. That's student food.
I did have that. Oh my God.
There you go. That's your dinner sorted.
Could I just share another funny one with British food? It was the first mince pies I tried at Christmas, and I bought them myself, but they were puff pastry ones from the bakers.
Puff pastry, okay.
Yeah, puff pastry mince pies. They exist. You could buy them in packets in the supermarkets, but you could buy them also from the bakers' shops. And I was convinced I was buying a savory something.
Yeah.
And I thought, surely they've mistaken my order. It can't possibly be mince. That is something different.
I had that one. Yeah, I was the first sort of office, because I come out of 25 years of corporate, and you're right, the first office Christmas party, have a mince pie, and I was like, I as you say, the whole concept of mince and pie, and at a party, I couldn't quite. And then, as you say, the surprise when I love them, by the way, but I have to have them warm. But again, it's one of those where we've taken on some of the flavors around us, right? But then mince, because mince is meat, right?
Mince is meat, mince meat.
And mince meat, and then actually, when you look in history, that's exactly what it used to be. It did used to be a meat pie. It did used to be mince meat, and then it graduated to something different. I can't remember the full history of it, but I do know that's where it originated from, and that's the name. But yeah, for people like us that just arrived to the country, please explain.
That's the thing. I'm just thinking we should do a video where we explain like British food for novices, that people that come. Do not put anything in baked beans. Mince pie is actually sweet and things like that. Just make a list of do's and don'ts.
I love it. There's a book in that. There's definitely a book in that.
Can you tell me a little bit about inspiration behind your cakes and what sort of flavors you like to bring in, and when you come up with a new recipe, do you like to mix in different recipes and mix in Bulgarian recipes with English recipes? And
so I don't ever start a recipe from afresh. What I really more correctly do is adapt recipes. And yes, and it all happens through my palate. I just taste something and I immediately think, oh my God, this needs a little bit of orange, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And that's how I come up with my own style of baking. It is, the way I describe it is like somebody's put the lights on. It needs to be vibrant. It needs to make your tongue dance. That's what, for me, good baking is. And I draw inspiration from history, from the world behavior around, the festival calendar around the year, how we celebrate our festivals. And there is a lot. It's a lot. I'm learning every single day. It's exciting to read about the different customs, the different recipes. They're fantastic recipes all over the world. People know about French baking, but there is amazing baking in Sweden and, in Europe, all over Europe.
The Netherlands, yes.
Netherlands, yeah. All those many.
Let's just mention.
Yeah. Totally. Many of the Christmas recipes that we know now have been actually born elsewhere, and the spicing and the gingerbreads, and so that's where I draw my inspiration from.
Can I ask you a question? So I find it very difficult to write down, that I wrote the recipe book, and I found it very difficult writing down a recipe, because especially with spices, I will just pick and choose and put a little bits in, smell, taste, and I can't tell you it's a spoonful of this, a spoonful of that, or 10 grams or 100 grams or whatever. I just find it very, very difficult to follow a recipe, and I find it very difficult to write down the recipe when I make one. And sometimes it's a hit and miss. But I guess both of you're nodding as well.
I'm because the Dutch Foodie was actually not born as the name of my business. It was actually born when I was still in corporate, and I was started a blog, and I just needed a name for a blog, and within an hour it's like, whatever, the Dutch Foodie, and it stuck. And it started because someone said, everyone's always asking for your recipes, why don't you write them down and start a website, a blog. Someone said that at 10 o'clock in the morning on Facebook, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon I had a website up and running with one recipe on it. Never done anything like it. But what I learned is exactly what you said. I can do it now, write recipes down, but it's incredibly hard if you're a natural cook. Because I don't believe in the recipe being the be all and end all. To me, it's a guide, just like what you say, Mina.
Yes.
And I do similar. It's a guide. It's an idea. I adapt things. I appreciate not everyone does that. Not everyone even wants to do that, or not everyone can do that. So those people that follow a recipe to the letter, I find there's so many recipes out there that are either written in the wrong order, or you start with doing this and later on you've got a break. You say, well, why shouldn't this should be here? And as you say, quantities. How many people does it actually serve? I don't know. Are you very hungry? Are they 16-year-olds people that will eat the whole fridge, or are they 65 and they, I find recipes very, very difficult. So to write down my own, as you say, very hard. And I'd always put, if you go to my blog now, all the old recipes are still on there. It says serves, I don't know, 4 to 6, because I don't know, you know, one or two tomatoes. I don't know, are there big ones? Your eggs, I mean, we're baking, Mina. Are you using large eggs or smaller? I mean, that makes a huge difference. So I find not just writing it down is difficult. I also find one of the things that I try and help people with and inspire them with is to not be stuck by a recipe, but to understand what Mina just described as well, what we've been talking about with the baked beans, about flavor and how to create flavor and what goes together. And that's, for instance, how I work with my recipes, as in how I create my menus, because I'm not stuck in any particular way. Just like Mina adds Marmite to her caramel to add certain umami, I look at a menu, I look at a dish, and I go, something needs something. And I don't care whether it comes from any kind of cuisine, whether it's, you know, I do a signature starter, which is beetroot and gin cured salmon with beetroot tartare with pomegranate and a horseradish and avocado creme fraiche. And you're like, well, where that comes
so
from?
Nice. That sounds so fresh. And
exactly, but you're like, is it a particular cuisine? You could say with the horseradish and the salmon, it's maybe Scandinavian inspired, but then you have, you know, beetroot and gin, and that's so, and then you've got avocado and pomegranate from the Middle East. Where that come in? Because what you do is you build flavor and you build textures as well. You build textures like pomegranate will give a pop when the rest is creaminess or there's so just like Mina, it's like, and when it comes to recipe writing, you sort of lose that if you stick with that, because it's more important to understand the flavors that you're after and the textures that you're after, and learning how you can add things or take things away, so that when you read a recipe, you can already see if it's going to work or not, because it's too sweet, or it misses tang, or it misses umami, or it just. So that's sort of what I try and help people with, to understand the deeper side behind the food, rather than just, here's a recipe, just follow that, you know? Yeah,
no, I completely agree with you.
So I'm really fortunate. I don't try to educate people how to bake, because really creating recipes is one of the hardest things ever, because you have to record every single change you make until you arrive at your absolute perfect and favorite recipe, and you have to then test it quite a few times with those particular measurements, which requires an enormous discipline and time, and it's a altogether different kind of proposition. I bake from my heart, and so the medium, the large eggs, it makes a massive difference if you use medium or large eggs, because 4 large eggs equal 5 medium eggs. And that will change the ratio between dry and wet ingredients. And yes, it's only here in Britain, it's not known in the rest of the world, but I know the chef recipes. I've got some professional recipes as well, they're all in grams, and that's a bliss. But when you bake for a long time, you learn to know what to expect and what the mix needs to look like. So it's going to be a successful mix.
It's about trying to share those things with other people around us, and share those memories and experiences. And so speaking of memories, can you think of a flavor or a dish or a cake that wakes up the Madeleine de Proust sort of syndrome in you? So something that will wake up an emotion or a memory from childhood, a smell that you will smell, or a flavor, a particular spice maybe, or a cake. Shall I start? I have a cake. I have a cake that we make in Serbia. And again, that's my British fun story. When I made it here for my partner, he was like, can I add a bit of cinnamon, or can I warm it up? It's like, no, you're supposed to eat it cold, and it's just a little bit of vanilla, that's it. It's a kid's food, but it's called koch. So I don't know if you have it in Bulgaria as well. It's not, I think it's probably more Eastern Europe, but it's basically a semolina cake. So
Oh,
you
yes.
do like a sponge, but with half semolina and half flour, and then after cooking it, you pour basically a liter of milk, a whole bottle of milk, with sugar and vanilla. Well, in Serbia we generally have vanilla sugar. I don't know if it's the same. So rather than having vanilla, now they started using, proper vanilla essence or vanilla paste. But back in the days when it was so expensive, vanilla was so expensive, it was always sort of little bags of sugar with vanilla inside. Yeah. So we put 5 of them in a liter of milk, and then kind of pour it all over the sponge, and that would put in the fridge, and then I could eat the whole tray by myself. It's not good. But so that's my little Madeleine de Proust. I used to make that. That's one of the first cakes that I made. I used to make it with my cousin. So that's always very, very good memories and nice memories for me. So how about you guys share yours? Mina, do you want to go first?
So I must tell you, my first baking experience was when I was about 10 years old, to be honest. And I got hold of my mother's recipe book, which was absolutely enormous, handwritten notebook with now I understand, then I did not, but very briefly written recipes with ingredients and maybe bake till da-da-da. So no oven temperature, no butter the dish, which I did not. So I created this cake and I took it to my friends. It smelled amazing. We devoured it, but we had to chisel it out because I hadn't buttered the dish. So my mother had this she was a recipe collector, all right, but thinking about it, she was not very adventurous as a baker, and she would make this apricot cake for our birthdays, and she would make it consistently every birthday for many years, thinking that it was our favorite cake, and it transpired it was her favorite cake. So,
that's the story of my mom.
So that cake would bring me way back straight to my childhood. Cake with cooked apricots. It will be soaked with the apricot syrup, and then it will be a marshmallow frosting on top, and it will be lovely, very sweet and fragrant. But yeah, that's my flavor. Marianne?
I can taste the flavor. I know that cake. I can taste the flavor. I know what you're talking about. That's
I don't
yummy.
know the cake, but I'd love your mum's recipe, and I'll just remember to butter the dish. But mine's not a cake, although there's many cakes that my mum used to bake, and actually my first cooking experience was from baking. So my mum loved cooking, but she baked every week, so I was always baking, and that's where I first started helping out with in the kitchen and licking the bowl and everything else. And then I took that to England and started baking every week for just me and my boyfriend, and realized that wasn't very good for the waistline, so I stopped doing that. But no, the bigger food memory for me that crosses through so many life memories that I've gone through as well, not just a country, is mussels, moule marinière, where the first memory of them is where we used to have this big pot and we put it in the middle of the table. It was a round table in our kitchen, the kitchen of the home that I just bought, that I'm going back to next year.
I love this story. You'll have to
kitchen,
story with us a bit later on.
Anyway, so this big pot of mussels, and there was 4 of us, me and my brother and my parents, and we'd all just dig in from that big pot. Now, obviously, Dad was much quicker with that than we were, so we were always like, by the time we were getting to the bottom, most of the mussels were already gone. But that was ties to me with the memory of sitting around a table, and as the relationship with my parents started to break down, we ate less and less from the table. So I remember that we didn't used to have the big pot of mussels on the table anymore, whereas I do remember, for instance, going out to restaurants where we'd still eat mussels, and eating mussels also links me back to I went to drama school in Antwerp, and when the mussel season opens in Belgium, every restaurant will have an outside table where people will eat mussels, whole rows and streets full of people eating mussels.
But they still have the big pots, don't they? They do at restaurants, and many restaurants nowadays, they will put the big pot and then...
Oh, yeah, no, what I mean is what we did is as a family, put one big pot in the middle. But yeah, eating the mussel pots, and you'd have rows and rows of restaurants, everyone with their own mussel pot. So that's the other menu that comes back. And even, I mean, I can go through mussels. I could write a book about my memories with mussels. But the interesting thing is, as well, even over here, as a private chef, I cooked for a family in February, and they were half Belgian. So Mum's Belgian, it was her birthday. And they specifically wanted Belgian food from the coast. So there was, for instance, mussels as well. They've just invited me back to cook for them next week, and they want exactly the same menu with the brown shrimp croquettes and mussels, which I serve in the little pot, etc. So even from way back at the table, all the way through studying in my childhood and here in England, being served mussels as a start in a little bowl, and I'm like, where's my big mussel pot? It should be at least a kilogram per person. What are you talking about? Right, all the way through to even in my business, where people come back to me, because I'm one of the few people that will serve the mussels the way they do it in Belgium, in their own mussel pot, in their own home.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. You have a real love story with mussels, don't you? Yeah. It's amazing. When is mussel season? You said when mussel season opens.
To be honest, they are available every month with an R in it. I don't know quite whether that's still the case, but that's what I was always taught. But the mussel season, the way we used to have it, I know exactly.
2 months in my head is like
January. So there's a few in the middle, like May, June, July, August. They don't have R's in it. But from September through to April is mussel season. But I seem to remember, the way I remember mussel season was always in the summer, so that doesn't go with the months with an R in it, so I'll have to look that one up. But it would be a specific date, and they would announce it saying mussel season opens then. And I seem to always have sun in my mind, so
well, if it's September, maybe it's still sunny.
Maybe
and
it might have been
wrapped up warm,
And that's when literally all the restaurants would have mussels, and on the sidewalks, all tables one after another, and everyone would be eating mussels and serving the same menu. Mussel, it was big in Belgium.
Oh, I love it. Do you eat mussels, Mina?
Oh, I love mussels. I love seafood.
You love seafoud. Yeah, I come from a country that doesn't have sea. So in Serbia, we don't have a sea, so I don't really eat seafood at all. It's I know, it's terrible. I have a story when I went to Brittany for a friend's wedding, and they had a giant, platter of seafood, all the best things. In Brittany, they have really wonderful seafood. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't like this, I can't eat it. And I was the maid of honor as well, and I felt so bad. So they were like, okay, well, I'll just give you a vol au vent. I don't know if you know what it is, the puff pastry filled with, you just have a vol au vent, just like whatever we find in the fridge, we'll just give her this, to dismiss her basically for being so uncultured. And
vol au vents are very big in Belgium as well. And when I'm going back to that half Belgian family in 2 weeks' time, actually 4 of them are having mussels and 2 of them are having vol au vents.
Vol au vents. Okay, I'm not the only one then. Yeah, I haven't had a vol au vent in so long, probably since the wedding, which is 10 years ago, I don't know. But do you make Bulgarian cakes?
Very rarely I have requests for Bulgarian cakes, and they are, going back to my mother's recipe book, they would not be very
let me guess, not sweet enough.
Yes, they're wholesome cakes. They are cakes that are made with fruit. But people would have their gardens. They would have fruit to use up. There are many apple cakes, and as I said, my mother's apricot cake. We used to have an apricot tree in our fruit garden. They would be historically very simple ways to sweeten the day without it being very refined baking. So my children love this apple cake from my mother's cookbook, recipe book, which I always make a few times a year. And it's interesting because it's one of the simplest recipes ever, but they vary. They eat it so much with such joy and gusto. It's not. I do use a lot of European baking, so not many people know, but Russians have amazing cakes. And when I say Russia, I mean the former Soviet Union, because I know there's some Ukraine cooks from Ukraine, and they make the same cakes, and it's disputable which was exactly when it was born, but many of their desserts were and beautiful cakes were dedicated to princesses and to royals. And that's very similar in the rest of Europe as well. So there would be a signature hotel cakes. And there are some cakes like that that are very, very well known and adopted in Bulgarian, like Torta Garash and the Medovic. We do use in Bulgaria a lot of European bakes. And I didn't know as a child, I can't even remember I think my mother was calling it clouds. And it was, now I understand as a grown up that it's île flottante, which is a French. Île flottante.
Yes.
Pronunciation may not be right.
Floating islands, they call it here. Floating islands.
Floating islands. She used to call it clouds, and she used to make it every now and again. It used to be my favorite dessert. And
in Serbia,
she didn't have any tea either.
So in Serbia, we make it slightly differently. It's not creme anglaise, it's just milk, I think, but vanilla milk. But we call it schnelkle, which I think is a German word.
I think that would probably originate from Austria more, because they have Nocken and they have something which is quite similar. Something Nocken. It's not coming to me right now, but it's quite a large dessert and it's based on egg white, but it goes in the oven rather than necessarily being poached like in flottante.
Okay, so the schnell,
but it probably comes from that kind of area. So and then you go back to obviously the Austrian and Hungarian. And Mina, I know that you're very big, and I'd love to talk to you more about the history of baking, and I similarly with the history of food. And I mean, we probably won't get around to it, but nutmeg is one of those things, for instance, where with the history and everything else, there's lots of connections also between the different countries with some of those things. And I'm sure with that dessert, that'd be a whole new episode.
We need to make another episode. We need to make a map, an interactive map, and say this comes from there. If I were a bit better at tech, I would do that, and we could all add things.
But
on
you
map.
probably wouldn't be able to do that, just like what you just said about what was said about the Ukrainian and the Russian bakes, for instance, to actually say where it's from. Similar with the Netherlands and Belgium. I mean, it's Belgium in particular. It's been part of pretty much any country going until it became independent in 1836. It's been part of the French, of the Germans, of the Dutch, of the Spanish. Everyone's owned Belgium, right? So if you then start looking at where is a recipe from or where whatever, well, was it part of Germany at that time? Was it part of France? Was it part of the Netherlands? Was it? So those things, those borders literally become blurred, right?
Exactly, and it evolves as well. So the way it was 300 years ago won't be the same as it is now. So yes, maybe it came from that region. Maybe we could kind of focus on regions and centuries or decades when it was born, but it has evolved. The same as macaron, for instance, they came from Italy rather than France. Everyone thinks that they come from France, but actually originally they came from Italy, but they were completely different to what we know now to be, Parisian macarons, French macarons. But yeah, that'd be really interesting, actually, making a map of different foods, maybe select 20 different foods and try to trace back the history.
Croquetas from Spain actually is debatable whether they come from Spain. I mean, a lot of countries have croquetas or similar, but the Dutch have croqueta, which are deep fried, whatever, and they're completely different croquetas. But we used to be part of Spain, so who stole what from who, right? So those kind of things, it's really interesting. And then with South Africa, Dutch links to South Africa. In Indonesia, there's some foods from the Netherlands that pass to Indonesia. They love mayonnaise, for instance, over there. Well, that wasn't in Indonesia before.
It definitely wasn't, no.
And vice versa. So it's like
Yeah.
And then it changes, which I think that whole thing is fascinating.
We could write a whole chapter about baklava coming, from the Ottoman Empire, but in each country it's a different recipe. Like we don't use pistachio in Serbia. We don't do baklava with pistachio. We do it with walnuts. Whereas I know, in Turkey they will do it mainly with pistachios, and other places will do it with almonds. So you could probably write a whole. I'm sure someone has probably written a book about baklava.
Oh yes,
a history of baklavas. But yeah, what do you use in Bulgaria for baklava?
Well, baklava. I make baklava for Christmas. I had baklava for my Christmas stall for Reigate Christmas fair, yes. And I made one normal baklava and one vegan baklava. And this Turkish lady arrived. She did not have baklava. Then she said, "Could I try it?" Oh my Lord! The acknowledgement you get from a Turkish person to close her eyes and say, "Oh, this is amazing, delicious." And I wanted to drop down and say thank you.
Isn't that amazing? I know.
So I know the feeling. That's what I get when French people try my macarons and they love them, and I'm like, I'm just grateful. You don't need to say anything. You don't need to pay me. I'm just say you like them. I'm happy. That's fine. That's enough.
Exactly. So I use pistachio in vegan baklava. And I use the mix between walnuts and pecans in normal baklava. So in Bulgaria, we would use walnuts, but pecan nut is not very popular there at all. Though I find pecan a bit sweeter, but it does have the quality of the walnut. And so what I do is I usually use 50-50 in a baklava.
Amazing.
Yeah. See, in Serbia, baklava is generally vegan. It's very rare that because we don't. Butter is really expensive, has been known to be so expensive, in Serbia. So people didn't bake with butter up until recently. And even now it's very rare. So baklavas are vegan generally. And rather than honey, we use sweet sugar, sort of lots of sugar, like sugar syrup. Sometimes honey, but sugar syrup. And then, nutmeg or cinnamon. I think cinnamon as well. It's on some degree, but walnuts. And I never used to like it as a child because walnuts hurt. That I have some sort of allergies to walnuts, so it hurts my tongue. So I hated baklava as a child. And then I tried baklava from my Turkish friend from her restaurant, her parents' restaurant, that was pistachio, and it was so nice and so juicy. And I'm like, I like baklava now. So now I'm on the edge. I don't know. It depends on which one. But yeah, you said Marianne about nutmeg. That's something that's where does it come from? Come on, guys, tell me, educate me. Where does nutmeg come from?
Mina, do you want to do this one or shall I?
Oh, please do. I'm sure you're more knowledgeable.
No, I don't want to give a whole history lesson, but nutmeg in particular actually was grown. We're talking back in the 1600s kind of thing, 1500s, 1600s. It was only grown on one tiny, tiny, small island in the East Indies. Now, the East Indies became a Dutch colony. And, long story short, basically, nutmeg, for various reasons, including medical reasons, became worth more than gold. And it was only one little place in the whole blooming earth that grew that thing. So both the Dutch and in particular the Brits went after this. They eventually it became what's known as the Nutmeg Wars. Now, I would highly recommend that you Google this and read and watch on YouTube anything that you can find about.
I'll put a link in the description box.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The thing is that it's not a like with most colonial history, it's not the prettiest part of the Dutch colonial history. But it did cement the Dutch, in particular the Dutch spice trade, as becoming the absolutely massive in the world, and it even triggered the birth of the New York Stock Exchange. So from going from a tiny little island with nutmeg and going to war with the Brits over it, the Dutch won, and they basically dominated the spice trade based around nutmeg to start with for centuries to come. And with that, we still, even if you look at very small spice cabinets or little cabinets, not even spice cabinets, just little cabinets in Dutch kitchens in particular, which they used to be porcelain and with like in a wooden frame and little drawers, and one drawer would have rice, and one drawer would have flour, one drawer would have whatever. There's like 4 little drawers, and one of the drawers most definitely always would be nutmeg. It's one of the most basic things, and used to always be one of the most basic things in a Dutch kitchen. It makes it into apple tart, for instance. Cinnamon and all those other warming spices also, but nutmeg is like the key. We put it in, you know, it goes into white sauce, it goes into our croquettes, nutmeg goes everywhere.
Yeah, that's the thing. In Serbia, we generally use it for sweets, for cakes and things, but we use it all through the year. It's not just Christmas.
No.
We use it all.
Savory as well. We use it,
but it's sweet. Whereas, yes, I discovered that in France, that savory and nutmeg, as I say, it just adds that little hint of something that to elevate the white sauce, for instance. You use a lot of nutmeg, Mina, don't you? That's one of your favorites.
Sorry, say this again.
Mina, you use quite a lot of nutmeg. That's one of your favorites, isn't it?
Oh,
around Christmas.
Yes, I do use a lot of nutmeg, but I was introduced to it as a savory ingredient for us. That's interesting. It was a Christmas meatloaf my mom makes only ever for New Year's Eve celebration. And then I very quickly discovered that if you overdo it, if you don't, stick to the, you can very quickly kill a meal.
Yes. Yes, you have to be very careful.
You have to know.
You have to be very careful. And then subsequently I discovered that the little, it's not a shell. What is it? How do you describe it?
The cover. Mace, you talk about mace? Yeah.
Mace, yes. Yeah. So that is actually even more expensive than the nut. It is. The nutmeg itself. And what I do is I get mace and I mill it together with the, because I grind my spices, you see, I'm on.
Of course.
That's how particular I am.
That's what you do.
I mill it with some cinnamon. And it creates this really more complex, deep flavor. It's absolutely amazing. So I do use it. I love it. And there's some Bulgarian dishes where I use some in the sauce, as you said, Elena, in the sauce. And
mulled wine.
Oh yeah, mulled wine. Say this again.
Christmas is coming. We have to.
I think it's a little bit underrated, and for some people it's a new territory, and I would urge absolutely everybody. Yeah. Easily accessible, you could buy it literally from any supermarket, and if you get the nutmeg itself and grind
please don't get the ready grated stuff, but I say that with most spices, to be honest. Yeah, just a little grater and but the nutmeg, I mean, especially in Dutch cuisine, also in our baking, nutmeg and cinnamon are just like they're staples out everywhere. People, and also the Belgian cuisine, as I say, that they're so linked in some ways. But one of the little complimentary treats that I bring to my clients are little homemade Biscoff truffles. Very easy to make, but Biscoff, people think, oh, it's American or whatever. It's actually Belgian.
We had that conversation, yeah.
but even with Belgian, it's still a debate: is it Dutch or not? Because Biscoff, it's more like a brand name. It's speculaas. Speculaas in Belgium and speculaas in the Netherlands, and it has everything in nutmeg, cinnamon, ginger, all the things that, like the gingerbread kind of spice that it has in there as well. And it's what we're famous for, but that flavour, the Biscoff flavour, which has now gone worldwide under the term Biscoff. Whenever I come to my clients and I give them a little handmade Biscoff truffle, which is easy to make, but everyone loves Biscoff. That flavour is something that people are like, oh my God, Biscoff truffles, yes please, right?
Yes please, can I have some? And moving on to the future now, and some positive, and what are your plans? Marianne, do you want to share with us maybe your plans of moving back home?
Well, mine are quite big, yeah. It wasn't fully planned, but long story short, I'm moving back in 6 months, and when people say the Dutch Foodie, they think I'm going to the Netherlands. I'm not. I'm moving back to Belgium, which is where I grew up. In fact, after my dad passed away, my brother and I sold the parental house that I've seen being built where I grew up. We sold that, split the money. That's it. That was the inheritance. and we sold it to an estate agent. And as I was back in Belgium for a funeral just a few months ago, it was put back up for sale, and I bought it back. I bought back my parental home in Belgium where I grew up, where I had the mussels around the table, so the kitchen where I first started baking is going to be the kitchen where I'm now going to reset up my business. Initially, I'll start again doing exactly what I do here, which is the private chefing and the online. But gradually over time, it'll be more and more online. I'm getting older, not younger. So with the future, I want to make sure that I use the rest of my time in business to share as much of my knowledge that I've gained with as many people as possible, before I say it's all yours now. So yeah, I'm moving back to Belgium, and my business is moving back to Belgium, which means that all of a sudden I'm working on new menus, because all of a sudden I have to rethink the food I put on the table, because when I have to get used here to build menus that fit for my clientele with still my own heart in it, that's still going to look quite different. So it's an interesting challenge. Yeah. And it's scary and exhilarating, and it's all around food again and going back to my roots and my food roots, and it's scary and it's great.
All the good things are scary, yes. And Mina, are you planning on going back home soon this year? Well, in the new year, I'm guessing.
Well, not the same way Marianne is. That is major. And are you excited? I
am excited, but I'm saying to my friends, quite a few of my friends are starting to take early retirement, and here I am starting up a whole new food business in another country again.
Because why not? Why not?
Being a nomad again, Helena. So
that's what it's
I am excited, but there's so much to do and to think about. That side of it is, I'm a planner. I'm a big planner, so I've got a huge calendar on the wall here with all the key milestones and reverse engineering it from there. But yeah, it's going to, starting a new business is difficult anywhere. So I'm not underestimating that, but all I can say is I came to this country with very little knowledge of what I was going to do. I came for love. This time I'm going back to a different kind of love, the love for I guess my country, my roots, my food roots even, and the people that I still have left there. So I have I'm quite convinced that I'll somehow I'll be okay.
You will be okay, for sure. You will be okay. You have that experience now. You know what you're doing, even though it's
done it before.
Completely different. Yeah, it's completely different in a different country. You've never had a business in Belgium, so it will be a completely new experience. But you'll be fine. You'll be okay, I'm sure.
So I don't have massive plans to reveal.
You need to come back. You need to come back when you do.
My journey is constantly evolving. I'm just trusting that it will take me where it needs to take me, because what happens is when I'm researching recipes, when I'm researching countries, desserts and all sorts, it inevitably shapes and molds where my interests go, and I always learn new things, and I'm quite open to adapt things and to do new things. So I'm just going to be doing more of that, to be honest.
It's great. You're doing great. So why not? Okay, so I'm gonna see you again for a map making history educational food episode of some sort. It was such a pleasure having you guys here. Thank you so much for coming, and come back anytime. And we need to put a date in the calendar for some sort of map after the holiday season. Thank you so much, ladies. See you soon. Bye.
Thank